Okay. Welcome, everybody. It's Monday, March 7th, 2022, and could be March 8th where you're sitting. And if you're listening to this recording, no telling when it is, but welcome. We're glad that you're here. This is Jim Mansky and joined by Jory as well today. And this is the Open Hearted Practice Group. And I feel really intrigued about what we might learn together today. I'm very curious about this topic that we have called flexibility in relating, and never quite taught it this way before. So I'm curious to get your feedback at the end. If you're here for the very first time, I wonder how you found us, and I'm really glad that you did. Just give you a little orientation about what we do here. This is a practice group in nonviolent communication. So we focus on practice, and we encourage people to choose easy stuff to practice with, because these are new skills for all of us. And we want to make it easy and fun for you. So we'll give you some guidance around that as we keep going. And we practice three different ways here. We practice what Marshall Rosenberg, the founder of nonviolent communication, called the three modes of NVC or nonviolent communication. First is self-empathy, which is kind of like the foundational skill for all NVC practice. And we'll practice that in a moment. And then we also have opportunities to practice honesty, or the self-expression part of NVC, like I'm practicing right now. And empathy, which is the listening part, which is what you're all practicing right now. And since there'll probably be somewhere around 40 to 50 of us, I'm the one who probably gets to do the most talking. And but we try to also do small groups so that folks will get a chance to practice the expression and the empathy in smaller groups as well. If you don't want to be in a small group, then you can do what a few people have done, which is put an equal sign in front of your name, and that just lets Jory know that you don't want to be in a small group. And with that, we'll go ahead and start with the self-connection exercise. Self-connection just being...
And I'll just say hi. Just before you do that, I'll say hi. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad that Jim is taking the lead today. A little brain fog going on here since my accident, and so and it wasn't an accident to my brain. It was an accident to my hand, but still, it's affecting me in that way. So I'm glad you're all here, and I'm glad he's taking the lead.
Thanks, Jory. I'm really glad that you're here. I really appreciate your support. So let's practice a little self-connection. You're already doing it. I mean, try to disconnect from yourself. It's not really possible, but let's just try to now enhance the connection that you have with yourself. And it's a tender time on our planet. So I'm going to use just a very few words and just kind of guide you in an experience of being present with yourself, to give yourself a little bit of rest from what we're all going through right now. And one kind of cool thing is to orient yourself to the present moment. And you can do that by just looking around. Literally orient yourself to your environment. Just let your eyes go wherever they want to go, rather than you trying to choose where to look. Just let your eyes go where they want to go, and just relax. Just relax your will for just a moment. This tends to have a settling effect on our nervous systems, because it gives our brain information that we're in a safe place. If you look around and you see something that tells you you're not safe, then please leave and go make sure that you find a safe place. But if you're going to stick with this, then just relax as best as you can into looking around. And then let your eyes find something that you enjoy looking at, something that meets your need for beauty, or connection. Somehow it awakens a sense of appreciation or gratitude. And then just let your eyes rest there and just soak in, savor the gratitude that you have. And then if you're comfortable doing so, I invite you to close your eyes. Only do it if you would like to do that. And notice what happens if you choose to close your eyes. It's as if the world disappears in a way, the visual world, but it leaves behind sound, textures, aromas, tastes. All those become somehow enhanced. I invite you just to listen. And as you listen, you may become aware of not only the sounds in your environment, but you may also become aware of thinking, the sounds of talking to yourself, this internal dialogue that most of us have. Not everybody has that. Almost everybody I've ever talked to is aware of their inner dialogue. So you can listen to that as well. And see if you can enhance the quality of your listening by encouraging your heart to open. Just to open to whatever you're hearing now. It's happening anyway. So see if you can let go of any sense of resistance to what you hear, and instead just let it come in. And notice that it comes in and flows right through. To be replaced by other sounds or thoughts. And then listen to your body. And what I mean by that is just to allow yourself to feel sensations and emotions. You might notice how your belly feels, or how your chest feels, or your throat, or your jaw, your forehead. If you notice tension, just notice it. You don't have to try to change it. Just notice, just like with sound, the sensation arises and then is replaced with another sensation. You may also be aware of emotions. Again, they arise and fall away like waves at the seashore. Each wave a little bit different than the one before, but all composed of the same water, the same you. It's your feelings. So honor them, listen to them. You might wonder, what am I listening for? Well, one thing you could listen for is content. What are what are they trying to tell you? Is that tight? Is that loose? Is that warm? Is that cool? And so forth. Or you could listen for meaning. What is that feeling telling me is important to me? What does it mean? In NVC, we label that needs. What's important to you? What are you needing? Specifically, what needs bring you to this call today? I'll make a few guesses based on previous experience that some of you are here maybe for learning about NVC. Maybe you're here for empathy, to have a sense of shared experience. Maybe you're here to support our community. Maybe growth is important to you. Maybe you'd like to contribute. Maybe it's something else for you. Honor those needs. And finally, consider what would make your life more wonderful for the next couple of hours. Especially, what can you do about it? What could you do to enhance your own experience of being on this call? And I'll just be quiet for about 30 seconds before inviting you to take the next step. Just 30 seconds of peace. And let the peace that you feel now radiate through the whole world, sending peace to those who need it most. And with the next breath, if your eyes have been closed, I invite you to open them if you choose to. And allow your eyes to rest on the screen. And look at who we are today. It's about 49 of us assembled. Glad you're all here. Jory's been busy in the background making small groups for us. This first small group is, we call it a check-in group. It's a chance for you to just maybe meet some new friends, maybe reconnect with people that you haven't seen for a while. It's a relatively brief opportunity for connection, about 9 minutes, plus a couple of minutes to get things straightened away. So it's to be a total of 11. So Jory will set the timer for 9 minutes. And in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, once the group starts, you'll see a little countdown timer. And when it gets to 0, you don't have to do anything. You'll get a little message that says the breakout rooms are closing, but you don't need to do anything. You can just relax and keep connecting with each other. And that'll take about 2 more minutes to bring everybody back. So what do you do in the small groups? Well, just introduce yourself. Maybe say a sentence or two about why you're here, what needs are bringing you to the call today. Maybe an idea you have about what you can do to get the most out of the call. And make sure there's room for everybody to express. So everybody has about 3 minutes. And it's really great if you can turn your camera on. I know sometimes people don't like to have their camera on in the big group. That's fine. But if you turn your camera on in the small group, it just helps people to feel safer. That's the feedback that we get. So if you're willing to turn your camera on when you get to the small group, that can really enhance the experience of safety for other people. And if you want to come back here into the main room, Jory and I will stay here in case there's a question or something comes up. And we'll see you all back here in about 11 minutes.
And if you entered the call after the self-connection exercise started, you'll likely stay in the main room until I can assign you to another room. Okay, so with that, I'll open up all the rooms. We can ask, well, let's just let it ride because we can put it into the email I put out. We can just say we haven't decided if we haven't. Okay. All right. Welcome back. Zoom. I now know why they call it Zoom. You just zoomed back. And I'd love to hear anything that anyone has that they'd like to share about what we did last week. Any feedback or any experiences you had in relationship to that?
And
Last week was transforming conflict. Nope.
Beneficial regret.
Beneficial regret.
Yeah.
So anything anyone wants to say about their experience of beneficial regret? And I just want to check, Siva, is that the topic you're willing to talk about right now? Or do you have something for later?
I think I could tie it all together. I'll try.
So what was your experience around beneficial regret?
I regret that. Well, I love the learning from last week that I wrote around the infinity sign, where the quote from Marshall Rosenberg is, "If I knew then what I know now, then I wouldn't have done then what I would know to do now."
I would have done something different. Yeah. If I knew then what I'm learning now, I would have done something different. And it'll always be that way. That's Marshall's quote.
Yeah, thank you for the correction.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Is that enough? And I'll go to Ellen.
I did it with my service dog because I get short with him sometimes. I get impatient. He's a puppy. But I realized it's because he gives me independence and he also gives me connection. And I don't want to lose that connection with him because I am so starved for that. And that it was a very old feeling that came up. So with that, I went back to my therapist and we worked on that some as well. And it was quite productive. Thank you for that subject.
Thank you, Ellen. All right. And anything else to harvest?
Well, there's something in the chat that I wanted to respond to from before the break. Someone asked if this is recorded in speaker or gallery view. I tend to record it in gallery view. If that answers your question. I don't exactly know how to control it. I think what I do on my screen is what happens for the recording, but I'm not really clear on that. And then, and Nikhil Anand lets us know that he heard from Alexander, who often comes to this group from the Ukraine, and that she is currently in Germany. So I actually take a deep breath hearing that.
Yeah, really.
And Sarah Joy.
I think my hand went up accidentally. I put a heart up before for the last speaker. And I'll just say that I'm holding a lot of pain and sorrow for what's happening in the Ukraine. And I'm not sure how to put that into a regret. Maybe I regret I'm not being present as much for people as I'd like to be, and wanting to do more for people in the Ukraine.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah Joy. I'm in the same
Thank
boat.
you.
I'm in the same boat, and I have started a resource list along with some other trainers, and I will share that Google Doc with you at the end of the call. It has lots of places to get information and how you can contribute money or other things if you would like, and also some emotional support opportunities as well, both giving and receiving emotional support. So I'll share that at the end of the call.
I would like to take a minute of silence right here, right now, as we hold the people who are involved in conflict. So let's just take a moment. Yeah. Then we'll call on Shelley. Is it Shell or Shelley? I forget. Shell, isn't it?
Miss Shell.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Do you have your hand?
Yeah, I just, I'm sort of really resonating with the deep sense of what's happening in the world. And I wasn't able to come last week, which is in itself a big regret. And I guess my sense of sadness is perpetuated not just by what's happening in the world, but what's happening directly in our town. We experienced some really serious floods last week, which I was very blessed. My house wasn't affected, and nothing leaked so much, but my father and many, many people that I know have lost a lot. And it's really quite a lot to hold with everything else that's happening in the world. Yeah, and I don't know, I just sort of felt like I wanted to share because it's been such a deep, deep place to be in. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, you're welcome, Shell. I catch that for you. There's mixed feelings. On the one hand, you're grateful that you're okay and your house is okay, but you're also really feeling a lot of pain about the impact that the storm has had on other people, especially in Queensland. And I know it's affected we have a friend there, a trainer, Kate Crombie, and she's been affected by it in a similar way, where it's kind of mostly things are okay, but some things are not okay. And just really holding, and this is a once in a 1,000-year event, it sounds like, that you guys went through. So imagining that it's quite a stressful moment for you. Yeah, thanks. And Rob?
Yeah, I was trying to think of an example of beneficial regret. And I've been planning this trip to Europe, and I have a lot of money in stocks. It's gone down. What am I doing? And I spent all this time getting this really great, this one site getting this really great deal. And then I didn't take it. And then the next day I realized, oh my God, talk about beneficial, that was a scammer site. That wasn't a true rate. I was just reading reviews about it. So I regretted not being decisive like that. And in the end, it's like, oh, good thing, you know. So does that sound like beneficial regret?
Well, only you know. I mean, the idea is that beneficial regret just refers to the idea that maybe I missed an opportunity to contribute in some way, and then I caught it either with the support of somebody else or another animal or myself, and then I realized I could learn something from this. So that's the benefit is now from now on, based on this experience that I've had, maybe I'll do things differently. So is that what happened for you?
Yeah, and so is this sort of like you see like your ego process? I mean, that's what I'm trying, you know, you go through, you feel awful, you do this, da, 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 and then you see later, oh, that's just my ego process. You know, oh, thank you for showing me, thank you, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of connecting to gratitude about getting in touch with old habits. That makes sense.
Yeah, and awareness is the key there. So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome. Tanya?
I'm seeing a connection between the previous one on feedback and beneficial regret. I'm seeing this connection, sort of like the feedback leads to the beneficial regret.
Exactly.
And I've been thinking a lot about how people like Putin, autocrats in general, but we get full display right now with Putin. What happens to a human being who doesn't get any feedback and doesn't get a chance to develop their beneficial regret?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
just like, I saw an interview with President Biden, and he was speaking about a different autocratic leader telling him that autocracies are better than democracies because the world moves so fast. And I just laughed because if we don't have, if we don't get feedback, we just do increasingly more stupid things.
Yeah. I know. We really need feedback. We do enough stupid things with the feedback that we get. Yeah. I get it. Yeah. Thank you. Anything else, Tanya?
Anyway, that was top of mind for me, and also a reminder to check on my own autocratic nature and do something about responding to the feedback I get.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I got a message on the chat from someone who is using an Android phone and is having trouble with Zoom. So if you think that you can help this person with Zoom on an Android phone, if you could send me a chat and I'll get you connected to them and see if you can help them, because I don't know anything about an Android phone and Zoom, so I can't help her. Okay.
You know, Jim, maybe that person would just, delete the app and reload it.
Okay, so there's one suggestion is to delete the app and reload it and try again.
Or just call in on the telephone number and avoid all the hassle of the app.
Or you can also just call them.
Is there a phone number that they can call in, or would that be too expensive?
There is a phone number that gets sent out every week in the link. I think there's a way that you can connect by phone, and I can, if she needs the phone number, I can give it to her.
The important thing is the connection with the face, and that's I think what that person is desiring. If I know who it is.
Right, that's exactly right. She'd like to be able to see faces, and right now her screen is black, and so she's not able to see anything. Thank you for putting the numbers into the chat. that might be helpful. And when I have a Zoom problem, I usually just disconnect and restart my device and call back in, and then it usually takes care of it, but not always. It's almost always a little software glitch, but it could be old software too. Okay, so let's dive into the lesson today. Share my screen with you, and we'll get a chance to practice here. So the name of the skill, we've been working on these skills from the Pathways to Liberation Matrix of Self-Assessment. And the skill that we're working on today is called flexibility in relating, and defined as openness and versatility in interacting with others. And I love this picture that someone gave me that to demonstrate flexibility in relating. And it's a pathway. All of these skills are set up as pathways. I don't want to read through this whole thing with you right now. Rather, I'm going to give you a chance to hopefully experience it in your body and in your mind. But basically, we always start with not even knowing there is such a skill. And then we end up with the skill integrated as part of our consciousness. So one example would be everybody here probably knows how to tie your shoes, even though the next generation may be able to live life without tying shoes because the new shoes you don't have to tie. But anyway, at one point you didn't know how to tie your shoes. Then you learned how to tie your shoes. And if you tried really hard, you could do it. But now you can tie your shoes while you're listening to a song or singing a song or doing all kinds of things. It just becomes part of our consciousness. And that's what we're working on with these NVC skills is practice, practice, practice in the presence of community and getting feedback in order to make them more a part of our consciousness. And so here's a little mind puzzle to think about today as we go through this. And in the tradition of Zen, they sometimes use these little poems. And so I made up this poem today. First, there was no jackal. Then there was jackal. Finally, there was no jackal. And for me, this encapsulates the skill of flexibility in relating. So first, let me just explain what jackal means. So Marshall Rosenberg, when he was developing nonviolent communication, he was trying to figure out a fun way to express something that's very, very painful for us, which is these life alienated communication patterns, which he nicknamed them jackal. And the reason that he nicknamed them jackal was kind of an accident. He was he returned to a city that he'd been to several times before with the same organizer. And every time he'd been to the city, he was with this woman who was his organizer, and they'd become friends over the years. And so they were just talking in the car. And Marshall remembered the last time that they were together, that this woman was talking about her communication puzzles that she had with her husband. Over and over again, every time he came back to town, she would tell him the new puzzles that she was working with. And so Marshall, just schmoozing with her, doing small talk with her, he said, "How's that jackal of a husband of yours?" And she laughed. She just thought it was hilarious. And it stuck from that. And so he started using these things called jackal ears. And some of you might have seen Marshall wear jackal ears, or other trainers wear jackal ears. And it's just a symbol of a certain quality of consciousness that we nickname as jackal. And we'll give you a chance to learn a little bit about some of the jackals in your experience. And to do that, think of some painful messages that you have either spoken or heard. And pick the ones that are kind of at a low level of intensity, so that you can stay present and work with them. And write down 3 examples of some painful messages. We've done exercises like this in the past. This is a different exercise, but the same observation. So you just think of some painful messages that you've either spoken or heard, and write down 3 examples. And I'll put that up on the screen in case you need some support in seeing it. And I'll be quiet for a minute or two while you just write down some examples. suggest you keep the messages short. Yeah, thanks, Aviva, for putting some examples in the chat. That might be supportive for other people. In fact, I encourage all of you to do that because that'll help with the next step, but I'll be quiet for another 30 seconds or so while you write down other examples. Yeah, keep them coming. Thank you, Ellen. So this, we have enough to get going here. So Marshall called, he kind of created a way of sorting these jackal messages and called them the 4 Ds of disconnection. And so we're going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but just to give you an idea. So one here that Ellen wrote is, you are manipulative. So, oops, that would be an example of a diagnosis. It's when we diagnose how another person is. And that's the clue to this kind of a jackal language. A diagnosis almost always contains the verb to be. And so you can train yourself to listen for the verb to be, and then you'll start noticing jackals everywhere. All you got to do is listen to talk radio or the news or watch movies, and you'll hear lots of examples of diagnosis. This doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with diagnosis. I mean, diagnosis can be quite life-serving, but in terms of how we often use it in our everyday language, we diagnose people without any training. So we tell people that they're a psychopath or they're a narcissist or they're selfish or whatever the phrase is. So that's one example of one of these 4 Ds of disconnection. Another one would be, Maureen put in the chat, don't be embarrassed. So that might be an example of a demand. And a demand usually has the form of telling somebody what they should do or shouldn't do. And then there's usually implied with a demand that there will be punishment if you don't do as I say. And or it could be that I will withdraw something that you do like as a, to withdraw a reward. So that would be an example of a demand. Listen to me would be another example, like Beth put into the chat there. And then let's see if there's another one here. I'm not available to speak with you. I am too busy. So that's a perfect example of what's called a denial of responsibility. Mm-hmm. It's where we put the, Jory, could you make sure everyone's muted? Because I'm hearing some background noise. It's where we place responsibility for our experience on outside forces or people. So often this kind of life alienated language has something like, I can't, or the example that I just said here, I'm not available, there's some sort of a rule, there's company policy, this is the way we always do things. These are examples of denial of responsibility. And then let's see here if there's an example of, okay, I don't see, this is actually the toughest one and the most pervasive one, but it's a hard one for most people to connect with because it's so deep in our culture. I'm not talking about American culture, I'm talking about world culture. a culture that is built on the idea that punishment's a good idea and reward is a good idea. And so this is the language that basically says something like, who deserves what? So if you're a good boy, Jimmy, me, you get an A. You get an A for the class. And if you're a bad boy, then you go to bed without a supper, something like that. So there's some sort of it's often related to a demand. There's some sort of a threat implied if we don't do what we should do. And then if we actually fail to comply with what authority thinks that we should do, then we deserve to be punished. And if we do behave in a way that authority thinks that we should, then we deserve to be rewarded. And that's part of what we're undoing with nonviolent communication. So you might just look at the examples that you wrote down and see if they fall into any of these categories. I'll just pause there and see if there's any questions before we keep going. So why would we spend time doing this? You probably don't need to spend any more time doing this. That is actually enough in your NVC training. That gives you the flavor. You won't ever quite be able to hear the world. If this is your very first time hearing this, you'll start noticing them now, and you'll just kind of see what the effect is. That's the purpose of learning it, is so you can start noticing the effect in your own life, whether you're receiving these kinds of messages or whether you're sending them. What is the effect on you? What's the effect on your relationship? This kind of Marshall nicknamed this the Jackal Postal Delivery System, and the general effect of this kind of message sending and receiving is disconnection, alienation, perpetuation of violence, and so forth. So these are the effects. Once we notice something and we can name it, then we have some chance to be liberated from it. So that's why we spend time learning a little bit about life alienated communication. Yeah, thank you, Tanya, for that quote from Walter Wink. Deserving is what makes violence enjoyable. So let's carry on here. So now here comes a quote from Marshall that kind of goes along with why we would spend any time learning this kind of stuff and what its effect is. Interpretations, criticisms, diagnoses, and judgments of others are actually alienated expressions of unmet needs. So that's the theory, and we're going to test it and see if it's true for you. So you could take this as a belief, and we could create a new church called NVC Church. If people didn't believe the right way, then we could punish them. But instead of doing that, let's just check it against our own experience and see if when we make a life alienated expression, that we're actually trying to express something about our needs. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen with you so I can just read you these rather than have you try to get caught up in all of them. I'll put them each step into the chat as you go and practice. So look at your list of jackal statements, or choose one from the menu of what other people have shared that you want to work with, something that would be relatively easy for you to practice with. So pick one jackal statement, and that will be what we call an observation. That'll be what we use as your observation that we'll practice with. So I'll give you some time to choose one. And the one that I'm going to choose is one that I said. I didn't say it out loud. I said it inside my head. You should reveal your feelings if you want to connect with me. That's a pretty good example of a demand. Anybody need any help with picking one out? You can always use mine if you'd like to practice with one. It'll work. Yes, I will put these into the chat, the 4Ds as well. Thank you for your requests. Okay, next step. Describe what happened just before you said or heard this. Describe what happened just before you said or heard this. In my case, I read an email from somebody that I interpreted as a complaint about something that I did. So I read an email and then I had that thought. You should reveal your feelings if you want to connect with me. So now be quiet while you describe. This is kind of deepening your observation, gaining more clarity about what actually happened. If you went to schools like I did, you might be really tempted to go into more jackal here. Rather than describing what happened, you might notice your own tendency to diagnose the other person, to deny responsibility and blame them. You might think about what they deserve and so forth. But see if you can just keep it just to the facts. See if you can just describe what you saw or heard before you said or heard what you said or heard. So, at the heart of things, nonviolent communication is a body-based or somatic experience. We're using our left brain and our right brain, of course, in order to kind of analyze what's going on here, to be able to train about it and learn about it. But when you're actually practicing, it's what's going on in your body that matters the most. So let go of whatever it is that you've written or are writing, and notice your sensations and emotions. What feelings are you having in your body when you're talking to yourself like this, or hearing this message from another person, or saying this message? Sensations just refers to anything like a tingle, to tightness, to holding your breath, gritting your teeth. All those are examples of sensations that you might notice in your body. Just start with that. If that's all you do, that's more than enough. I notice for me, I feel annoyed, angry, confused. Mostly I feel confused. What do you feel? So first you set an intention to notice your body, then you notice it, let yourself be present to these sensations and emotions. If you have the vocabulary to name them, you name them or describe them. That's all you need to do in this step. Notice and name. Yeah. Yeah, Sue says she started to cry reviewing the conversation, and that's a real natural a natural consequence of slowing things down and being present with yourself. Crying is what the body does when it feels extreme emotion. Could you be crying out of happiness or crying out of sadness or crying out of fear? Crying is a sensation. Thanks, Sue. And now the next step or part of the process is to link these feelings to your needs. In other words, what's important to you when you connect to this message? So for me, I was really needing connection and clarity. So see if you can find some language and use your own words if you'd like. Find some language to just describe what's important to you about the situation. So now we're going to take the leap and we're going to take that jackal message and we're going to translate it into giraffe. Giraffe was the symbol that Marshall Rosenberg chose for a life-connected communication, which is NVC. So it's the opposite of jackal in a way, in terms of now, rather than talking about what's outside of us and what's wrong or what's right with what's outside of us, we're connecting rather with what's going on inside of us. It's a language of self-responsibility. So the idea here is that you translate your jackal into giraffe, and this is the form that you could use. When I, and then you just put down the description of the observation. When I read your email, or I'm going to put it in the present tense, when I read your email, I feel annoyed, angry, and confused. So first comes the observation in this case, then comes the feeling. When I read your email, I feel annoyed, angry, and confused because I need connection and clarity. So that's the really critical part for the translation. First comes the observation, then the feeling, then because I need. And then you put your need down, or needs. And then the final part is the request. And we're just going to I invite everybody just to use the same request today just for ease. How do you feel when you hear me say that? That's called a connection request for feedback. Since we've been working with feedback lately. How do you feel when you hear me say that? So that's the translation process. And we're going to open up small groups now. Jory, if you're ready, for 15 minutes so that you can share your process of translation with each other. Everybody have about 5 minutes, and you might need some help. You might feel a little bit stuck getting connected to your feelings or getting connected to your needs. And so this is a chance for you to support each other. if the person wants support. I wouldn't go in and start supporting people unless they ask for it. Just listen first. But be available if somebody says, I need help with this, then help them if they would like help, like your help. We'll do everybody have about 5 minutes to work on their translation. Then when we come back, we'll do the next step in the process. If you need help, you can call for help. Jory and I will stay here in the main room, but we can always go visit any of the small rooms and give you some support. So whenever you're ready, Jory.
Yeah, and as usual, there are a few people who came in afterwards. I'll put you in a room, just be patient. Welcome back.
So we've done the translation, and now we're going to take the next step. But anybody have any, I can hear from 1 or 2 people here. We have enough time to hear from 1 or 2 people about what your experience was in this translation process. If anybody would like to share anything. Okay. I'll wait 1 more second or 2 to see if anybody has anything you'd like to share.
Jim, I have something. This is Guy.
Go ahead, Guy. Thanks.
Thank you. I've heard a lot, we talk a lot about the need for connection and how important connection is. Tonight, I heard for one of the first times, a need for a deeper connection.
Yeah.
Deeper.
Nice. Deeper connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. That came up in my little small group I was just doing with someone too. A need for a deeper connection, quality of empathy and understanding. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this what we've been doing so far today, and we would call classical giraffe or classical NVC or OFNR. It follows this particular format: observation, feeling, need, request. And if you go out into the world and start talking like this, make sure you talk like this only with people you don't want to continue to hang out with, because it will become irritating for people, because this is not how we normally talk. But it's very important that we learn how to do this, because it helps to kind of get some new tracks laid down in our brain, so we can get out of that old life alienated habitual thinking and start seeing that we have a choice. But if we get stuck there, we can end up actually perpetuating alienation. And so here's another quote from Marshall. I put it into the chat. During the initial phases of learning this process, we may find ourselves applying the components of nonviolent communication mechanically without awareness of the underlying purpose. So we can unpack that just a little bit. The 4 components are observation, feeling, need, request. Very important to know these concepts. But if we do it mechanically, if we do it as a rule-based system, we end up creating disconnection or stimulating disconnection. Believe me, Jory, would you like to share what our daughter said after our first NVC workshop when she came home from college and we were starting to try to practice with her?
Yeah, I remember that well. Who stole my parents and left you here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we didn't sound like her parents anymore. We sounded like foreigners to her. And certainly we didn't sound authentic.
So we can move beyond this simple translation process into a transformation process. So see if you can now take that classical giraffe sentence that you wrote that started with, when you did this, I feel that because you did that. See if you can write that in the language that you would normally speak every day. What would that sound like if you were to transform that language into what Marshall called street giraffe? What might that sound like? So for me, it might sound something like this. I read your email and I feel confused because I'm not sure what you would like. Can you help me understand what you'd like me to do? So it has those same components in it. I'll put it into the chat so that you can be with it. It has the same components, but it's in street language. I read your email. I feel confused because I'm not sure what you would like. That's my need, clarity. Then my request, can you help me understand what you'd like me to do? I predict that if I said that to this other person, they're much more likely to have a sense of connection because I'm speaking their language rather than expecting them to speak my new NVC language. So I'm taking the self-responsibility to modify how I speak so I can make it easier for them to connect. I want their life to be more wonderful, not less wonderful. So what could I do? So why don't you just take a minute or two and edit your expression into your language. And by your language, I mean your street language and also your birth language. If you want to practice in your birth language, it might be more fun. If you want to share your street language in the chat, that'd be fun for the rest of us probably to read and hear. I promise there won't be any correction, because how could I correct what you write? This is your language. There's no right or wrong here. You just get to express it in a way that works for you. So let's go back to small groups just for 5 minutes. So change the timer, Jory, to 3 minutes plus 2. Just real quick, everyone just do your transformed sentence, your street giraffe sentence. Then if there's a little bit of time afterwards, you can chat about it a little bit. But just a real brief touch back in with the group.
Few minutes plus 2.
Yeah, and if anybody wants me or Jory to visit the small group, you can let us know. Okay, you might be full. You might be full by now because we've done these two huge steps. We did a translation and then a transformation. And if you want to be done, you can be done. But there's one more step. If you really want to go all the way with this flexibility and relating piece, there's one last step, and that's transcending. So we go from translation to transforming to transcending. Transcending in this case is just a fancy word for empathy. You're going to transcend the difficult message and you're just going to experience it at the level of the heart. So I'll give you an example. First step is I put these ears on, my giraffe ears. Step one, put on giraffe ears. This for me, we call it the 0 step in some of our classes. Put the right ears on, yeah. But this is like setting my intention to, in this case, transcend a difficult message. And when I do this, now I'm listening for feelings and needs. I'm not listening for the content of their words. I'm not listening for what they think. Instead, I'm just listening for their feelings and needs. So imagine that you heard this difficult message, and then first guess, what are they feeling? Start with that. Put yourself in their shoes. If you delivered that message, what would you be feeling?
So Jim, would you repeat that step since some people didn't get back from their rooms until now? There's something weird going on with the rooms closing.
Okay, I'll put it into the chat, catch everybody up, and put it in the chat at the same time. So first, put on your giraffe ears for the transcendent part. Then listen for the feelings and the needs of the person giving you feedback. And start by guessing what they are feeling. In my case, I guess they were feeling concerned about something that I had written previously. Concern's a feeling. It's a safe feeling. Even in the business world, it's okay to feel concerned. So it's a really safe feeling that you can guess in most contexts. Even if you get pulled over by the cops, you could say, hey man, are you feeling concerned about how quickly I was driving? So start by making a guess about what they're feeling. And then take it one step further and guess what they're needing. Link their feeling to their need. In my case, I guess that supporting unity was their need. They wanted support for the idea of unity. I don't know what their need is, but I can guess it. Empathy is the guessing, not the guessing right. Just by me having this intention to try to transcend what they're thinking and transcend that into what they're feeling and needing, then we're much more likely to live in a world of connection. You could even guess, if you wanted to go all the way, you could guess, what do you think they want from you when they're saying that? What do you imagine their request is? You can guess their request as well as their feelings and needs. This process of transcendence is summed up in this quote from Marshall. Never hear what somebody else thinks about you. You'll live longer. Hear that they're in pain. Don't hear their analysis. When I'm able to do this, I have a sense of emotional liberation. I can put all my attention on their heart rather than making myself bad or wrong or feeling guilty or ashamed. So I'm going to do a little checkout here from a few of you in just a moment, but I'm going to, you remember when we started, I put this quote, this little Zen thing up. Where'd it go? There it is. Share my screen with you. We started with this little Zen kind of a quote. See what it means to you now after hanging out for the last hour and a half. First, there was no jackal. In other words, there was a time when we never knew there was such a thing as life alienated communication. We were just absorbed by our culture. We had taken it in and we were living from that place. And then suddenly we learn about NVC and we catch that there is such a thing as jackal. And now with this transcendent process of empathy, jackal disappears. All we hear are feelings and needs. Go ahead, Aviva.
Okay. I was wondering if you could say something about sort of this interesting tension between the previous prompt we had, which was like, if you want to hold someone accountable, you want to tell them your needs, you want to tell them they've caused hurt, and then this thing about you don't, you don't listen to what other people are saying because it just means that they would be in pain. But it is possible that someone's really trying to call you on your stuff in a clean, clear way, and it's not just pain, and it's like an actual like, hello, can you please wake up? So I was just wondering if you could say something about the tension between those two different ideas.
Yeah, for me, the tension disappears when I remember the purpose of nonviolent communication, which is to make life wonderful. So if I find out, I mean, that's actually the observation I chose to work on for myself today. I wrote an email and I used a particular phrase in my email. This was like a group email to a whole bunch of people. And this one particular person wrote and gave me the feedback. They didn't like the words that I chose. Well, I could get all defensive and I could try to say, and that was my first reaction, was pure jackal ears out. I wanted to defend myself and stake claim on my First Amendment rights to say what I want to say and blah, blah, blah. And then it took a couple of seconds for me to give myself enough empathy to realize that behind whatever they said, they had a feeling and a need. And I made some guesses about what that might be. And then I wondered, is there a way that I can make their life more wonderful? I don't know whether my choice ended up making their life more wonderful, but I wrote to them and I basically expressed beneficial regret about what I had written. And I acknowledged how they had felt. And I shared what I'd learned from the process. They haven't written back, so I don't know how it landed yet. I don't know whether I'll ever hear back. So I'm in the gap. But that's how I live in that tension. You know, I don't think I did anything wrong, but I see how I can make life more wonderful. Does that make sense to you, Aviva? What comes up for you when you hear that?
Let's see. I'm plenty of defenses come up, plenty of like, oh, is that the goal? Is to make life more wonderful and not just to be right and not to care about truth and advocacy and fight the good fight and fight the bad guys or show everybody to wake up. Like, is it really to make life more wonderful? And is that okay that that would be the goal? That's sort of a little bit uncomfortable to hear, to really sink in on that. You know, it sounds nice on the surface, but like
Yeah.
to really sink in with it, it's like then it means that the disposition of frustration is not part of the game, you know.
Yeah.
And that really the game is about, like, if it's to have more pleasant experiences, then it's kind of radical, you know.
It is radical. And maybe you like the more official version rather than make life wonderful. The more official version, and again, a quote from Marshall, is to create a quality of connection that inspires compassionate giving and receiving. So that's the official NVC way of using lots of big words to say making life more wonderful. But that's the world I want to live in, a world where people are naturally giving, contributing to people's well-being, and willing to be called on it when they don't. If I said or did something that affected you, Aviva, I would want to build enough of a relationship with you so that you would let me know, so that I could take a look to see, do I want to keep behaving this way? And maybe you would take a look. Do I want to keep behaving in the way that I'm behaving? And we can learn something together. That's compassionate giving and receiving. That way, both of us end up making our life a little bit more wonderful. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. And I see Ellen has her hand up, and then we'll move to the little checkout, the last things that I usually say at the end, and then we'll stick around at the end for more questions if you have them. Go ahead, Ellen. You're muted. I can't hear you yet.
So I had to laugh when you put up that first there was a jackal quote. And I said, where did I hear that before? Well, if anybody remembers Donovan, first there is a mountain, then there's no mountain, then there is. And I just have to laugh. It just made me laugh when I put the two together because it's a lot similar. And Donovan was quite the hippie at the time. So for anybody who remembers, it was, I mean, it took a while to sift from the downward side of me and put in. Thanks.
I'm glad you caught it. I'm glad you caught it. Of course, it's much older than Donovan. It is an old idea from Buddhism, or maybe even older than that from Advaita Vedanta, 5,000 years old. First, there's a mountain. You know, I see a world of form. Then I do this meditation or this process, and there is no mountain, and I'm kind of dissolved into oneness or whatever. And then I can enter back into the world again and navigate up the mountain if that's where I want to go.
Yeah.
Jim?
Yeah, Guy, go ahead.
And the follow-up to that line in that song is, wear your love like heaven.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. Yes, and I will put up the pathway again at the very end here for you, Faye. And you can find all the pathways at this website here, pathwaysofliberation.com. And if you add the word resources after the first slash, it'll take you to the recordings from all of our calls. A bow of gratitude to Rob, who is here today. Rob built this website for us. And so thank you, Rob. It's being used by people all over the world, thanks to your efforts. Yeah, thank you. And we put recordings up from virtually every call that we have. I think we're missing one call currently because I'm too lazy to go and edit it. And but I'll get to it one of these days, or just do the class over again. Also, we do all of our classes in the spirit of compassionate giving and receiving. And in other words, donation. And we're collecting donations on behalf of the Center for Nonviolent Communication, and other NVC projects. So if you wanted to deliver your donation for today's class directly to CNVC, you can do that by following the Donate Now link. Most people would think that a class like this would be worth somewhere, in the open market between $10 and $30. So if you wanted to just donate for this class and do that, you could give it directly to CNVC if you wanted to. If you do that, just let us know that you did it, just so that we can savor your gift. And we like it because it saves a step for us. And you might get, if you're an American taxpayer, you might get a tax deduction for the donation. So it might be a win-win. But if you'd rather give the money to us, you can use that other link there, which for some reason is there twice. I'm not quite sure why that happened. But and then we collect the money, and then we distribute it out as needs arise. We're going to be donating some of our money to support some of these things that are going on, to support what's going on in Europe right now. Finally, commercial wise, I wrote a book last year. Love for you to buy it. Excuse me. And that's how you can get free shipping internationally. You can also buy it from Amazon.com. Best thing to do would be order it from your local bookstore. Support mom and pop there. Ask your library to buy a copy or 10 so that other people can have it. Or maybe you want to buy 10 copies and deliver it to the local library as a donation. They'd probably appreciate that. And all the proceeds from that book, both from me, my royalties, and from Puddle Dancer Press, Marshall's publisher, and my publisher, will go to CNBC. So far, your generosity in buying the book has resulted in $1,500 of payments to CNBC. And so thanks for showing the book, Siva. I appreciate that support. And next week, what's our class next week, Jory?
Good question. I think I wrote it down. Hold on. Transforming conflict.
Oh boy. So now we're going to tie in all these skills. We're getting pretty deep into the woods here with how we can use NVC. So now you can imagine that taking these skills into the world and playing mediator, either in a formal way or an informal way. So we'll touch on how you can use what you've learned so far to start sticking your giraffe neck out in the midst of conflict and learning how to transform it. All right, so that'll be fun.
I'd like to give a couple of commercials as well. There is the MVC conference starting, and that will be in, I think it's April or May, but I'm about to send out an email about that. If you'd like to join us, we've been doing this for 12 years, and we have something like 8 or 9 other trainers who will be part of it. So it's a wonderful opportunity for you to join a group and also be connected to some other trainers, see what they have to offer. And then we are doing an international intensive training. Right now it is scheduled to be in person in LA. And I've also included that in some of our emails. So I invite you to consider one or both of those as other opportunities for your growth and learning and for the connections in our community. And hey, we might get to hang out together a bit more.
Yes, and if there's a practice group that you offer, like I think Rob might have something going on right now, and if any of you have practice groups that are open to the public, please put those into the chat as well, if you would like to let people know about it. And also if there's other resources that you would like to add for things that might enhance your growth or your opportunity to give. I mentioned earlier that I was created a resource page for how you can get involved with what's going on in Europe right now. There's some ideas there, everything from prayer circles to financial donations and so forth. And it's an open document, which is a little bit risky, but I'm going to try it. So if you have some ideas on how people can contribute to peace in Europe right now, or in any of the other conflict zones in the world. It's about 25 active conflicts right now. Then please add those to that resource list.
And we do at the end of these sessions is we open up breakout rooms that people are welcome to go back to. I juggle people around. If there's no one in your breakout room, or there's only one other person, I'll start putting people together. And so we'll open up those rooms, and those of you who have your hands up, you're welcome to decline going into your group, and we can find out whatever you would like to share after we get people.
Yeah, we'll stay here and answer your questions and share these resources. I'm going to turn the recording off and look forward to seeing you guys next week. Hope you have a wonderful week of practice.